My name is Julie, and I'm the admin of the Transsexual on the internet, and today I'm interviewing Erin Lindsey, who is the creator of the webcomic Venus Envy.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself for people who may not be that familiar with your work?
Sure. I'm Erin Lindsey. I created the webcomic Venus Envy.
Okay, so so real quick, I'd like to thank you for making that comic. I read it back when I was in high school, when I was kind of like trying to come to terms with my gender, and it actually helped me a lot, and I'm sure there's others who have been helped by it as well, so I want to say that first of all.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question that everybody wanted to ask, and I was going to ask anyway, is, are you still continuing the comic? What's going to go on with its future?
That's the question everybody's got. It's basically the last 3 or 4 years, life's just gotten very busy and very difficult, and I still have time to do a lot of writing, but a comic takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours at minimum to put together. So I can do a lot of writing that people will pay me for, or produce one comic that I get a few donations over. I really like to do, but it's just a difficult to find the time. I was kind of getting back into the rhythm of taking one night a week before our moving fiasco and my broken wrist. So, and then the last 3 or 4 months, our lives have been kind of, my wife and I, our lives have been somewhat of a challenge. We've had some housing issues and some employment issues and some health issues, and just sort of all hit in this perfect storm that tore down all the scheduling I was trying to put together.
That's definitely understandable.
Sorry, the little freak out. Is that coming across on the
Yeah, but it's okay. What kind of dog do you have?
She's a corgi mix.
Oh, nice.
We know the corgi. I think the rest is Australian Shepherd, but we're not sure.
That's pretty cool. How long have you had her?
We had her about 2 years.
Oh, okay. So with the current story arc, if you do continue it, do you know where you want to go with it? It, like I was saying before, it kind of ended on a cliffhanger where you last updated.
Sorry, what?
Oh, so what I wanted to continue saying is, if you continue the comic, where do you want it to go?
Well, right now this story arc is almost wrapped up. Back before everything fell apart, I was doing Wednesday morning nights so people could, at the very least, sign on to live stream and whatever. And I was putting together the next comic, which was Zoe waking up in the hospital, and there's a little preview image of that on my Facebook page, which I was hoping I'd finish a long time ago, but
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad
Zoe's alright, she's not going to die. Mostly her problem was some blood loss and going into shock, and her panic attack kicking in all at once. So, it looks a lot worse than it is. She'll have some scars, physical and emotional, but I do have the entire summer scripted out for her, and I have a loose outline for her junior year. It's just kind of a question of how far we're going to get.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I didn't know that you had posted like a preview of it, so I was kind of like at a loss at what was going to happen to her. Even though I figured she'd survive, but still. So the next question, speaking of Zoe, how did you come up with the character? Is she based off of you at all, or a completely unique character, or some sort of combination?
I don't think any author can make a completely independent character. I think everybody I've written has at least some little bit of myself in them. But Zoe Zoe's, Zoe's got a little bit of my manic side, and a lot of the strange things she's experienced I've drawn from some of my own life. Her whole first experience with a support group is pretty much scripted right from my first experience with a support group.
I remember that arc. So,
Yeah.
also when you're working with the comic, about how far do you plan ahead? Like, did you have a story from the beginning that you wanted to do, or do you do it arc by arc, or some combination?
Well, the comic sort of started accidentally. It began just doing a few one-off gags. There's an artist named Matt Nishi who did a bunch of little one-off gags about the funnier side of being trans, and most of his revolved around being F to M because he was F to M. And so I took some inspiration from that and drew a few from the opposite perspective and posted them to there was a mailing list I was on at the time that's still out there if anybody is listening and interested. It's called the Anti-Gen List, and it's just a mailing list of other younger trans people. Not that I qualify as a young trans person anymore, but people like them, and I ended up posting them posting them online, and the characters just sort of started evolving out of there. And once that got going, I started to put a script together for it, and I knew vaguely where it was going from, I guess, about 3 or 4 months in.
I guess I could definitely see that, because especially the first few strips were kind of more gag strips.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's...
if I could go back and restart the comic with what I know about writing and scripting now, I think it would be a much better story, especially in this first.
Have you ever considered maybe in the future doing some kind of reboot of it?
Oh, yeah, I think about that a lot, actually. And then I look at the many, many years of storyline that we'd have to go back over, and oof.
Yeah.
I thought about just writing a new first chapter, but it's mostly just an issue of finding the time. I've had a full-time job for the last 3 years, which was eating up a lot of my time, and it was kind of a stressful job with a stressful manager, so I'd come home completely exhausted and worn out and just wouldn't have anything left in me to draw. And that ended a few months ago. I had to find new employment, and I found a new job with a much better manager, but now I'm working much longer hours.
Mm. Are you... So you said earlier that you're doing things for, like, other art and writing for others. Is there anything, projects that you're allowed to talk about at all that you'd like to share?
Mostly I do writing in the game industry these days, but not really anything I can jump out and crow about and claim credit for. Mostly just trying to get some more queer representation and stronger female representation in games.
That's exciting, though. I actually saw a panel about women in gaming when I went to Comic-Con this year. Talked some about that. I thought it was pretty interesting. Let's see. Next question. So, and that kind of brings me to the next question as well, actually, is with the portrayal of trans people in particular in the media, in all forms, TV, comics. I haven't really seen them too much in video games, almost at all. But in general, what do you think we need to do to get it more out there? Do you think we even need to get it more out there? And I guess your opinion on that in general.
As in, do we need more trans representation in video games
In the
or
media.
in general?
In the media in general.
Uh, well, it's it's kind of a catch-22. There's I'd love to see more trans characters in media. I think it's a wonderful experience. Well, wonderful may not be the exact right word. It's an extraordinary experience that I'm happy to have survived, and I think it gives me a great insight. And I think trans characters in fiction or in movies, comics, can bring something to the table that is unique and interesting. But at the same time, I constantly worry that I worry about our subculture being watered down by becoming some sort of new fad. Basically, I'd love to see more trans representation, but I don't want to see a will and grace with trans characters.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to how I feel on the matter. The main thing that I feel personally about that is just that it seems sometimes when trans people are portrayed in the media, it's usually not very good. Or even when it is good, it's usually like really...
To be fair, it's a confusing subject if you haven't gone through it yourself. And there's so many differing opinions even within the trans community that it's hard to please everyone all the time. There have been some very positive examples, at least in the last few years. Gail Simone's doing a pretty decent job representing I'm trying to remember her name now. In the Batgirl comic she's writing, she's introduced a trans character who's
I saw that.
completely absent of any drama. There's a British TV show called Hit and Miss that's about a trans hit woman for the Irish mob who inherits a farm and 5 children. Which, despite what the premise sounds like, isn't actually a comedy, but it does have some problems with the trans representation, but it's also positive for the most part. And there's a Japanese series called Wandering Sun. I think it's only 6 or 12 episodes, but it's insanely good at representing the trans experience for children, and just pulls my heart out of my chest.
And can you watch... Do they have that on TV or can you watch it on the internet? Both that and Hit and Miss.
I believe Hit or Miss is on either Amazon Prime or Netflix these days, so you should be able to see that. I don't think Wandering Sun is available. I think you've got to actually buy the DVD.
I might have to look into that though.
But I'm always trying to find good representations of trans characters in media. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. Well, it's not really guilty.
Yeah. But I think it is starting to happen some more now. Probably like 10 years ago, you wouldn't find any decent representation that wasn't made
10
by...
years ago we had that god-awful Ally McBeal episode.
Which one was that?
Oh, there was one where I believe a trans employee was suing her boss over wrongful dismissal and... Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
The trans employee was suing her boss over being fired, and one of the lawyers at the firm started dating her, and there was drama, of course, because there's always drama, and it's just frustrating because it's always drama from the cisgendered point of view.
Yeah, that is something I've noticed, is even in ones that are usually from cisgender sources, even if it is like a decent portrayal of the character, it is usually drama. But hopefully with time, that'll start to become better. I mean, I know that with like gay and lesbian people, their portrayal was really was not very good recently either, and they're definitely more in the
It
spotlight.
does seem like any minority group has to go through this period of, I hate to appropriate this term, but sort of a blackface period, where you're going to be portrayed with these broad, almost comical strokes, and in very insulting ways, just to get the general populace used to the idea of you existing before you even get to see real representations of yourself.
Hmm.
So we've been going through that phase with trans people for a very long time, so hopefully that means we're ready to start moving forward.
Hopefully. I guess we'll see as we go. I do notice that a lot of webcomics are good on that, including, obviously, Venus Envy. But then again, those webcomics, you have trans creators making and writing them, so I think it's better than that.
One of my favorite things about the internet, there's no barriers to entry for creators to tell their own stories. So you've got black writers sharing stories from their perspective. You've got Hispanic musicians sharing whatever they want to without having to go through a white record company. You've got trans comic creators or pretty much any minority group that couldn't get access to the mainstream eye before the internet came along. All of a sudden they have some say in how they're portrayed.
So, the internet definitely is good in that regard. When you were first starting it, did you want it to be a webcomic, when referring to Venus Envy once again? Or did you kind of maybe want it to actually someday get published outside of the web?
I've always wanted to work in comics. That being said, I like my art, but I know it's just never quite been there as far as comics go. So I guess I'm happy that I had the ability to print online without having to submit my god-awful artwork to an editor or review board. At the same time, I did always hope that I could eventually turn Venus Envy into a regular ongoing monthly series. That being said, after working on it for so long, I think I really prefer it as a webcomic. It's more readily available, more freedom, and you can have an editor at some point, but...
Well, I think also, and I don't know because I haven't really worked at all with webcomics, but it might be kind of useful because you can change the format for each page, I guess, if you want to. Or you can't really. Or maybe you can, I don't know much about comic making. If you've seen the little timeline comics I put up on the Transsexual on the internet, which are extremely stupid, they usually are like shoddily done and not hand-drawn, so... let's see. So yeah. But I'd imagine, at least in some regard, the internet would give you more freedom than having a hard copy. Oh, so the co-admin of the page, Jenna, she also had a few questions for you. She's a really big fan as well. And I don't know if you've ever checked out, she does a trans-related webcomic too called Plastic. I don't know if you've ever checked that out, but she wanted to know, how do you think Venus Envy became so popular?
I think it's mostly just because there weren't a lot of options when I first started doing Venus Envy. The only trans-related comics I really knew back then were Venus Envy, obviously, Closet Space, which is still updating and still going, Lean on Me, which is a really cute story done by Jade Gordon, but she hasn't updated it in even longer than Venus Envy has without an update. And Matt Nishi's sort of one-off gag strip. I think people jumped on board because they wanted something like that, and there weren't a lot of options.
Yes, that makes sense. I can't remember how I originally found the comic. but I was looking up something trans-related in Google, and I kind of jumped onto there. Let's see. So that about actually runs out of the questions I had for you, but I still have a few questions that some people want to know. Once again, when I put it out for people to post questions, and I would choose 5 of them, like more than half of the questions asked were about the continuation, and we already got to that. But
I need to learn how to ditch this control freak streak in my brain and just find a writer. Because I can write, just find myself an artist, because I can write a comic, in a half hour, probably less these days, and it's just doing the art, which I really love to do, but it just eats up so much time.
And I do like your style, and that was actually one of the questions there was, is how did you come up with the style for the comic?
The style is really just my art style. It's how I learned to draw. It's sort of a combination of Looney Tunes and this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I grew up reading a lot of Archie and Betty and Veronica. So there's a lot of that in Venus Envy too. Bits of superhero comics, bits of manga. Most of my art skills were self-taught up until I went to art school 5 years ago. And so I just picked up a lot of bad habits from a bunch of different comic sources, and all of that mashed together is what makes my art style.
Well, I think it looks pretty good. Another question from a fan is just how have you been in general, and you and your wife? And you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but...
Yeah, we've been having some issues. Not the wife and I, we're still good together, aside from, every relationship gets a little rocky when there's so much stress. But we lost our home back in March, mostly due to problems with Bank of America. And we've been trying to get a new home, but again, because of Bank of America, we're having some difficulties with that. We've had my fall with the broken wrist. The dog ended up injuring her knee, and for a while we had a studio apartment we were staying in while most of our possessions were in storage, but the studio apartment got torn down.
Oh wow.
Yeah, turns out the entire back wall of the building was dry rot, and the whole place was about to collapse. So now we are in a friend's basement, which is where I am now, which is actually incredibly nice for a basement. And just sort of try and get things back in order.
Well, I wish you luck with all that.
Thanks.
Definitely sounds like a tough time recently.
I've been through worse, but it's not been the most pleasant couple of months.
Okay. Yeah, and then this entire time during it, like, my right contact started bothering my eye out of nowhere. So I'm not trying, like, not to rub it or have it tear up while I'm on camera. So let's see. And then, there's 2 more questions. But one of them was kind of already answered earlier. So the last question actually comes from my girlfriend, and she actually couldn't think of anything to ask you, so she wanted to ask you something that she wants to know about everyone, and that is, what is your opinion of ketchup on hot dogs?
I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other about ketchup on hot dogs. Hot dogs are kind of a blank palette, so I kind of feel like you should do whatever you like to them.
So that's a good question. So, or a good answer, sorry. She hates ketchup on hot dogs, that's why She always asks.
She's from New York, isn't she?
No, actually, LA, so kind of like the opposite, but... So, that's all the questions I have for you. Is there any other closing statements or anything you'd like to make?
No, I known I was going to be tested, but what's prepared for no, I think... Oh, God, I don't know, just, I really miss doing the comic, but it's... there's so much going on that some of the things I've really loved have had to take a back seat. And I'm really hoping once we can get the housing situation resolved, I'll be able to... my schedule will even out a little more. I'll be able to carve off one night a week to go back to drawing, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, I definitely look forward to seeing more of that, and I do thank you very much for the interview.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. It's nice to be remembered.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of people too who I think are looking forward to this. So with that, that was Erin Lindsey, and I guess that's the end of the interview. Check out VenusEnvyComic.com.